shooting an episode this week. We have Jane Seymour, who plays, Dr. Quinn, medicine woman, plays Judd Hirsch's sort of on-again, off-again wife. They've been married twice for a total of 4 months over a period of 30 years. So that'll be really fun. That's a great guest for us. Let's see, who else do we have our anonymous caller. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show, but there's an anonymous caller, and that character will come into play. We'll introduce him shortly.
Will we know him when you introduce him?
I think I don't want to really. You'll meet him. There's an episode coming up, our 6th episode, which will air not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, where it will be the first time that we see the anonymous caller as a person. We won't actually see his face, but he will be present in the show, see his shoes, his feet. He may even kill Henry. Great. It's a really, really fun storytelling device for us. So we don't have to do like a straight up procedural every week. We get to do our procedural, and then we also every week have a flashback story. And so that story can span any part of his 235-ish years. So as I said, we're going to do a flashback story that involves 1880s and the Jack the Ripper case. We're also doing a flashback story that we're shooting Tuesday that will be flashing back to like 1815. So it's a year after Henry was initially killed on the slave ship, and he comes back to London and sees his wife, who thought he was dead, and she's sort of standing over his gravesite, and he sees her for the first time. And then it's the episode is sort of, we try and have our flashbacks relate to the sort of theme for us of the episodes. We try and break a regular procedural, and then we try and get like real intellectual and emotional with it. And so the theme of that episode is trust. And so when he comes back and sees his wife, she starts to ask him, what happened to you? She sees the scar that he has on his chest and what happened. And it would be the first time he's ever told a person of his affliction, of what happened. And so he tries to tell her, and we see the sort of ramifications of what happens. And without giving too much away, the next episode we see Henry in Bedlam in London, which is, the old psychiatric unit. So it doesn't play too well. But so we get to do that. We also get to tell the flashback story of Henry and Abigail. It's sort of lost love, and we'll play that over several years and several episodes. But then we also get to flash back to like a young Abe. We have the baby in the pilot, but then we also get to see like a 10-year-old Abe. And we're doing an episode about jazz. And Henry is a big classical music fan, and we get to flash back to Henry and like a 9 or 10-year-old Abe when he's trying to teach him the piano, and Abe doesn't want to learn classical music, and from the apartment next door they hear like loud jazz being played in a fight, and this guy comes storming in that's a jazz musician, and his girlfriend sliced his hand, and he needs Henry to mend him. And while Henry sort of goes off to get his medical bag, the jazz musician sits down next to Abe and starts to play, and we start to see how like a young Abe developed a love of jazz. The first person that was cast in this show was Judd Hirsch, because it was just, you sort of make your list of people, and it was like, oh, Judd would be perfect, and then we sent it to him, and he accepted, and so he was the first piece of the puzzle. And the hardest piece of the puzzle was probably Henry. And we looked in LA, in New York, in Vancouver, in Toronto, in London, in Australia. I think we had someone in South Africa go on tape. It was just exhaustive search. And we couldn't find that person because you needed to have an actor that you believed actually went through this. And there wasn't like any wink-winky like, I'm dead, but it's so much fun, because I don't think the concept, you need someone who will ground it. And then one day I was dropping my kids off at preschool, and I saw this guy in like white loafers kind of get into his car, and I was like, anyone who can pull off white loafers can probably ground almost anything. and it was Yoan, and I knew him as an actor, but I Fantastic Four and all of that. So we looked into him, we sent him the script, he really liked it. We sat down, had a meeting, we talked about the character, he responded, and then he came in and auditioned, and he did a great job, took it to ABC, and he got the part. It was great. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that over episodes we will see them get closer and closer. When I initially conceived of the show, I wanted to do a show about mortality or immortality, and so every character I wanted to be dealing with that on some level. So Henry's is obvious. Abe, because he's older, is sort of gazing into the twilight of his years, and then Jo, has recently been forced to confront or deal with mortality because of the death of her husband. And so Henry is still sort of nursing this Abigail thing, and she has her husband who's recently deceased. So it doesn't feel necessarily like right for them to just jump into bed together, but it feels like emotionally they can be two people that have been hurt and are having trouble not looking into their past and being open to a future, so they can kind of help each other sort of get there. And so we'll learn a lot more about their relationship, about Jo's past. We'll do a story that deals with Jo's dead husband that comes into play. Jo's going to find in the course of that episode a old deposition that he took, and that relates to the murder that they're studying. And at the end of the deposition, he gets a phone call, and it's from her. So she gets to actually see this phone call that was recorded on tape between her and her dead husband. It's her kind of watching it at home alone one night, and like there's a knock on the door, and it's Henry, and they'll sit on her stoop and kind of have so it's those kinds of moments that I think we can bring them closer together. I think people will start, yes, by the end of season 1, in a 22 episode order, someone will get kind of close to figuring out what's going on here. Yeah. But we have, our big episode is going to be episode 11, which will be our last episode before Christmas, which we will introduce the anonymous caller, and a couple of big game-changing moments will appear in that episode for us.